"Get out of here," said the doctor. When Keanu came to his hospital, what Keanu did will leave you speechless. The night before, Keanu Reeves sat alone in his dimly lit study, the soft hum of the city outside barely audible over the thoughts racing in his mind. The reports had been piling up, numbers, charts, efficiency metrics, all showing that his hospital, Hopewell Medical Center, was performing exceptionally well. Profits were high, patient turnover was quick, and wait times were at an all-time low. But something didn't sit right. There was no way to quantify compassion, no way to measure human dignity. Lately, whispers had reached him. Patients being treated like burdens. Doctors who saw numbers instead of faces. Families being dismissed when they questioned decisions. And worst of all, a few complaints about one particular doctor, Dr. Ethan Caldwell, who seemed to care more about speed and statistics than human lives. Keanu had built Hopewell Medical Center on a different vision. A place where kindness mattered as much as treatment. A sanctuary, not a factory. But had he lost sight of that? That's when the idea struck him. If he wanted the truth, he needed to see it himself. Not as Keanu Reeves, the admired owner, but as an ordinary patient. Someone overlooked, just like so many who came through the hospital doors every day. And so, the next morning, Keanu Reeves, the Hollywood legend, the wealthy philanthropist, vanished. In his place, an unassuming man with tired eyes and a scruffy beard walked into Hopewell's emergency room, gripping his stomach as if in pain. A tattered hoodie, faded jeans, and worn-out sneakers completed the disguise. No VIP treatment. No special privileges. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and like the video so you don't miss tomorrow's video. Keanu shuffled into the Hopewell Medical Center emergency room, clutching his stomach. The air was thick with the smell of antiseptic, the muffled sounds of heart monitors, and hurried footsteps filling the space. Nobody recognized him. The waiting area was packed. A young mother sat with her feverish toddler, rocking him gently while filling out a clipboard. An elderly man with a trembling hand gripped his chest, his breathing shallow. Across the room, a teenager clutched a bloodied rag to his arm, his face twisted in pain. And yet, no one moved. The receptionist, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and an even sharper tongue, barely glanced up from her screen. "Name?" she asked in a robotic tone. Keanu hesitated. John Reeves." "Reason for visit?" "Stomach pain. Been getting worse," he groaned, playing up the act. She let out a sigh, as if annoyed he existed. "Fill this out. Wait time is about 6 hours." 6 hours? Keanu's gaze darted around the room. People who clearly needed immediate care sat slumped in their seats, waiting. An old woman's hands were shaking, her lips pale, yet she was ignored. A father holding his unconscious son was told to sit and wait. And then, Dr. Ethan Caldwell walked in. Tall, lean, and exuding an air of arrogance, Caldwell scanned the waiting room with disinterest. He flipped through a patient chart, clicking his tongue. "We need to move faster," he muttered to a nearby nurse. "Triage should prioritize efficiency. If it's not life-threatening, they can wait. We're not here to babysit." Keanu froze. This was one of his top doctors? This was the man people had whispered about? He watched as Caldwell waved forward a wealthy-looking patient, an older man in a designer suit who had just walked in. "Right this way, sir," Caldwell said smoothly, guiding him past the desperate crowd. The young mother's eyes filled with tears. "Excuse me, my son has a high fever." Caldwell didn't even look at her. "Not urgent. Wait your turn." Keanu's stomach churned, not from his fake illness, but from rage. He had come here expecting flaws in the system, but what he saw was worse than he had imagined. It wasn't just inefficiency. It was cruelty. Keanu clenched his jaw, his hands curling into fists. He had played many roles in his life, but nothing had prepared him for the sheer indifference he was witnessing. This wasn't just bad management. It was systemic neglect. Across the waiting room, the elderly man who had been gripping his chest slumped forward. His body jerked slightly before going still. Keanu's heart pounded. Someone help him. A nurse passing by hesitated, her eyes darting toward the reception desk where Caldwell was still chatting with the wealthy patient. She seemed unsure. "Hey," Keanu's voice cut through the noise. "That man needs help now." Heads turned. The nurse rushed over, shaking the old man's shoulder. No response. His breathing was shallow. "Doctor, we need a crash cart here," the nurse called out. Caldwell barely spared a glance. If he's still breathing, he can wait. We don't have enough beds for every little issue. Something inside Keanu snapped. He pushed himself up from the waiting room chair, his disguise forgotten. Are you serious? His voice was low, but it carried weight. The entire room went silent. Caldwell finally turned to look at him, eyes narrowing. Who the hell are you? Keanu exhaled slowly. He had wanted to observe, to understand what was happening before taking action. But now? Now, he was done watching. He straightened up, pulling the hood from his head. The scruffy disguise was no longer necessary. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Recognition dawned on faces. Caldwell's expression shifted from irritation to panic. Keanu Reeves was standing in his emergency room, and he had seen everything. Dr. Caldwell swallowed hard, his usual arrogance flickering under the weight of Keanu's icy stare. The once buzzing waiting room had gone silent, all eyes glued to the unfolding scene. A security guard stepped forward, unsure of what to do. The receptionist's mouth hung open. Nurses stood frozen in place. Mr. Reeves. I didn't realize you were here, Caldwell stammered, his confident facade beginning to crack. Keanu ignored him and turned to the nurse still tending to the unconscious elderly man. What does he need? The young woman blinked, her voice steady but urgent. Signs of a heart attack. He should have been treated immediately. Keanu nodded. Then let's fix it. Now. The nurse and two others rushed into action, finally getting the man the care he should have received an hour ago. Keanu's eyes snapped back to Caldwell. How many other people have suffered because of you? His voice was quiet, but lethal. Caldwell bristled, trying to regain his composure. I was following hospital protocol. We have limited resources. We can't treat everyone like a VIP. Keanu stepped closer. A VIP? His voice was like steel. That man wasn't asking for special treatment. Neither was that mother with the sick child. Neither were the dozen people you just ignored. Caldwell scoffed, regaining some of his arrogance. You think you understand how a hospital works just because your name is on the building? He smirked. We prioritize efficiency, Mr. Reeves. If you want to run a charity, that's your choice. But wait. Enough. Keanu's voice cut through the room like a blade. He turned to the nurses, the patients, the staff. If this is efficiency, then it's failing. His dark eyes locked onto Caldwell's. And it ends today. Caldwell froze. What do you mean? Keanu let the words sink in before delivering the final blow. You're fired. Gasps erupted in the waiting room. One of the nurses covered her mouth. Caldwell's face twisted in shock. You can't do that. Dr. Caldwell stood frozen, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Security moved in, their presence unmistakable, but Caldwell didn't resist. He knew he had lost. This isn't over, Caldwell muttered under his breath as he grabbed his coat. Keanu didn't even spare him a glance. He wasn't worth it. As Caldwell stormed out of Hopewell Medical Center, Keanu turned back to the stunned staff. I know that some of you followed his lead, Keanu said, his voice steady but firm. And I know that some of you didn't have a choice. His eyes swept over the nurses, the orderlies, even the receptionist, people who had been working under a system that rewarded speed over compassion. A long silence hung in the air. Then, one of the nurses stepped forward, the same one who had tried to help the elderly man earlier. She took a shaky breath. Mr. Reeves, I wanted to help him sooner. We all did. But Dr. Caldwell, he threatened people who questioned him. If we went against him, we'd get put on the worst shifts, written up, even fired. Keanu nodded. He had suspected as much. He turned to the entire room. That ends today. Murmurs spread through the staff. Some looked hopeful. Others looked scared. I know change won't happen overnight, Keanu continued. But starting now, this hospital will put patients before profit. A tense silence filled the room. Hope. Skepticism. Fear. The staff exchanged glances, uncertain whether Keanu's words were just another empty promise or the beginning of something real. Keanu stepped forward, speaking clearly, with purpose. This hospital was built to heal people, not turn them into numbers. That's going to be our focus from now on. A young resident doctor raised her hand hesitantly. But the board, the investors, they care about numbers. If we slow things down, if we prioritize every patient equally, won't that hurt the hospital financially? Keanu smiled, a knowing glint in his eyes. I didn't start this hospital to make a profit. His voice carried through the room. I started it to make a difference. The murmur in the crowd grew louder. Some nodded in agreement. Others still seemed unsure. An older nurse, her face lined with years of experience, took a cautious step forward. I've worked here for 20 years. I've seen good doctors leave because of how this place was run. If you're really serious about changing things, she hesitated, then met Keanu's gaze. Then tell us how. Keanu took a deep breath. First, we're reviewing every policy starting with triage. No more prioritizing based on status or money. If someone needs help, they get it. The young mother with the feverish child gasped softly. She had been ignored just minutes ago. Keanu continued. Second, I'm hiring more staff. No more overworked nurses running on empty. No more cutting corners because we don't have enough hands. The exhausted night shift nurse in the back visibly relaxed, her shoulders dropping as if a weight had been lifted. And finally, Keanu's gaze darkened slightly. If there's anyone here who still believes efficiency is more important than compassion, you can walk out that door right now. A ripple of energy spread through the room. The staff exchanged glances, some skeptical, some hopeful, but for the first time in years, something felt different. Keanu nodded. All right. First things first, we get the right people in the right places. He turned to the nurse who had spoken up earlier, the one who had tried to help the elderly man despite Dr. Caldwell's orders. What's your name? Maria Alvarez, she said cautiously. Keanu gave a small smile. Maria, you've been doing the right thing despite the system working against you. I want you in charge of patient care standards. Make sure every person who walks through these doors is treated with dignity. Can you do that? Maria's eyes widened in shock. She had spent years watching doctors like Caldwell take control while nurses were ignored. No? She was being asked to lead. After a pause, she stood a little taller. I won't let you down. Keanu turned to a young doctor who had been silent up until now. What about you? You look like you have something to say. The doctor hesitated, then took a deep breath. Dr. Patel, sir. I just finished my residency here, and I became a doctor to help people, not rush them in and out like a factory. If you're really serious about this, I want in. Keanu grinned. Good. You're head of the new ethics committee. Every decision we make, we run it through you first. The room was changing. People were stepping forward. Keanu turned to the receptionist, the one who had turned him away without a second glance earlier that day. She stiffened, expecting to be fired next. Instead, Keanu spoke gently. I know why you acted the way you did. Caldwell made it normal to treat patients like problems instead of people. He let the words sink in. But that's not going to be the way we do things anymore. The receptionist's face softened. She nodded. I want to do better. By the time Keanu stepped into the hospital boardroom, the news had already spread. Hopewell Medical Center's executive team, a group of sharply dressed men and women who had spent years managing the hospital like a business, sat waiting for him. Some looked furious, others nervous. At the head of the table sat Gerald Whitmore, the hospital's chief financial officer, a man who had approved the policies that had turned Hopewell into a machine instead of a place of healing. Mr. Reeves, Whitmore said, his voice carefully neutral. I assume you've heard from our investors. They're concerned. Keanu folded his arms. Let me guess. Profits might go down if we actually take care of our patients? A long silence. Whitmore forced a chuckle. With all due respect, sir, hospitals run on money. If we slow things down, if we stop prioritizing efficiency, we risk. Risk what? Keanu interrupted. His voice was calm, but beneath it, rage simmered. Another long pause. Whitmore sighed, choosing his words carefully. You might own this hospital, but you can't just fire our best doctor and start handing out leadership roles to nurses and young doctors. That's not how things work. Keanu leaned forward, his eyes burning with intensity. It is now. The boardroom went dead silent. Keanu continued. I built this hospital to save lives, not to squeeze profits out of the sick and desperate. If any of you have a problem with that, there's the door. Whitmore scoffed. That's easy for you to say, you're a movie star. You don't understand what it takes to it. Keanu cut him off. I just spent one day in my own hospital as a patient, and I saw more than you have in years. His voice dropped lower, deadly serious. You're the problem? Whitmore's face paled. Keanu stood up, looking at the rest of the executives. Things are going to change. We're creating a patient-first initiative. No one gets turned away because they don't have money. No more ignoring the people who need help the most. One of the board members, a woman in her late 50s, spoke up. Mr. Reeves, I've been with Hopewell for 20 years. I've seen this hospital change under Whitmore's leadership. Not for the better. If you're serious about this, you have my support. Keanu nodded. Then let's fix what's broken. Whitmore shoved back his chair. This is a mistake. Keanu smiled. No, Gerald. Keeping you around would be the mistake. With Whitmore gone, the board sat in stunned silence. For years, they had operated under his rule, balancing profits over patient care, justifying inhumane efficiency as necessary. But now, Keanu had flipped the script. He took a slow breath and faced the remaining executives. This hospital isn't just about medicine. It's about people. And starting today, we're going to prove it. The older board member, the one who had spoken up earlier, leaned forward. Mr. Reeves, I support your vision, but these changes won't happen overnight. The financial side. Keanu held up a hand. I know. That's why I've got a plan. He walked to the whiteboard at the front of the room and picked up a marker. In bold letters, he wrote. Then, underneath it, he listed. Patient-first care. No one is denied treatment based on money. We implement a financial aid program for those in need. Staffing reform, more nurses and doctors, better training, and burnout prevention programs. New leadership, promote doctors, nurses, and staff who actually care about people, not just numbers. Community outreach, free clinics, public health education, and mental health support for those in crisis. Cutting executive salaries, redirect unnecessary administrative bonuses to patient care and hospital improvements. When he finished writing, Keanu turned back to the group. This isn't just talk. This is happening. A few board members glanced at one another, their hesitation wavering. The youngest member, a financial strategist in her 30s, finally spoke up. If we make these changes, we're going to lose some investors. Keanu shrugged. Then we find new investors. The kind who actually care about what we're building. The older woman smiled. You really believe in this, don't you? Keanu met her gaze without hesitation. With everything I have. Keanu didn't waste a second. By the next morning, the Hopewell Initiative was in full motion. The first order of business? Rebuilding trust with both the patients and the staff. 1. Meeting the frontline workers. Keanu spent the day walking through the hospital, talking to the real heroes, the nurses, doctors, receptionists, and janitors. He stopped by Maria Alvarez, the nurse he had promoted the day before. Maria, what's the first thing that needs to change? She hesitated, then exhaled. We need more nurses on rotation. The burnout is killing us. Keanu nodded. Consider it done. Within hours, a hiring campaign for more nurses and medical assistants was launched. 2. Breaking the money barrier. A woman in the billing department approached Keanu nervously. Mr. Reeves, we have patients drowning in medical debt. What can we do? Keanu's jaw tightened. We fix it. By the afternoon, he had met with the hospital's legal and financial teams, working to erase predatory medical debt for low-income patients. For the first time in years, patients wouldn't be afraid of seeking care. 3. The people take notice. As the news broke, something incredible happened. Donations started pouring in. People, celebrities, everyday workers, even former patients, wanted to help. One message stood out. Envelope with arrow, I was turned away from Hopewell last year because I couldn't pay. I almost died. Thank you for making sure that never happens again. Here's $500. Wish I could give more. The reforms had barely begun, but the pushback came fast and brutal. By noon, Keanu's office phone wouldn't stop ringing. Emails flooded in. Lawyers, investors, and high-ranking hospital officials, all demanding answers. Then, a meeting request landed in his inbox. Envelope with arrow urgent. Mandatory emergency board meeting. Subject: critical financial review of recent policy changes. Time: 6 p.m. Location: Hopewell Medical Boardroom. Keanu knew what this was. The corporate investors, the ones who had been profiting off Hopewell's old system, wanted to shut him down. Keanu stepped into the massive boardroom, his face unreadable. Across from him sat 6 men in dark suits, their expressions ranging from irritated to outright furious. At the head of the table sat Richard Langley, a billionaire investor and one of the largest stakeholders in Hopewell Medical Center. Langley leaned forward, clasping his hands together. Keanu, you're making a huge mistake. Keanu didn't flinch. I'm fixing one. Langley smirked. You're bleeding this hospital dry. Free care? More nurses? Debt forgiveness? That's not how you run a business. Keanu crossed his arms. It's how you run a hospital. A younger executive scoffed. Hospitals are businesses, Reeves. You think you can just play hero and ignore the financial side? Keanu's eyes darkened. I don't ignore the financial side. I ignore the greed. The room went silent. Langley let out a cold chuckle. You own the hospital, Keanu, but you don't own us. We have a controlling stake in Hopewell, and if you keep interfering, we'll. Keanu held up a hand, cutting him off. You'll what? Pull your money? Sell your shares? Fine. Do it. Langley blinked. Excuse me. Keanu leaned forward, his voice dangerously calm. I already started looking for new investors. People who care about medicine, not just profits. He glanced toward the exit. So if you want out, there's the door. The room erupted into chaos. Executives whispered furiously. Langley's face turned red with anger. One of the younger board members hesitated, then cleared his throat. Wait, new investors? Keanu nodded. In the past week, we've raised millions in donations alone. And now, we have ethical investors lined up. People who want to fix healthcare, not exploit it. Langley's smirk faded. For the first time, he looked genuinely worried. Keanu leaned back, arms crossed. So what's it gonna be, gentlemen? Silence. Then, one by one, board members started nodding. Langley stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. You think you've won? His voice was cold. Keanu met his gaze without hesitation. I know I have. The next morning, the entire hospital buzzed with energy. Word had spread. Keanu Reeves had fought off the corporate investors, and the Hopewell initiative was officially unstoppable. Doctors, nurses, and staff felt the shift. The weight that had pressed on them for years was finally lifting. But Keanu knew his work wasn't done yet. Standing in the hospital's main atrium, he faced his staff, patients, and community members. Cameras from news stations were rolling. This moment wasn't just about Hopewell. It was about changing the way hospitals worked everywhere. Keanu took a deep breath and stepped up to the podium. I started this hospital to help people, he began, his voice steady. But somewhere along the way, it became about profits instead of patients. That ends today. The crowd erupted in applause. He continued, We've fired those who put money before medicine. We've hired new doctors, more nurses, and started forgiving unfair medical debt. But that's just the beginning. Keanu paused, then smiled. This isn't just a change for Hopewell. This is a challenge for every hospital in the country. The audience roared. Reporters scrambled to take notes. The world was watching. Then, Keanu turned to his staff, the people who had fought through the worst days, who had kept going even when the system failed them. This hospital belongs to you. The nurses, the doctors, the patients who walk through these doors. Hopewell will never be a factory again. It will be a home. Tears filled Maria Alvarez's eyes. Dr. Patel smiled for the first time in days. The receptionist, the janitors, the techs, they all knew it was real.